What's going on, folks? Obviously, it's been quite a long time since I streamed here, so hopefully I'm catching everybody way off guard. Nobody's expecting this stream, so hopefully we get some people to join up. We shall see. It's been so long since I streamed that I don't even know if everything's working. So I'm gonna have to test, or I'm gonna have to wait until we get some comments to see if things are actually working. Let me load up YouTube Live. Yeah, it looks like I'm streaming. All right. Join up, people. I know it's been a while. There we go. Hey, Ethan, Tetrapod, James. Sweet. Cool, Zumi. Thanks for joining. All right, so hopefully Twitch is up as well, and we are. The Nostalgia Factor, welcome. So what's up, guys? So this is going to be a pretty crazy surprise stream. But ultimately, what happened was this weekend, I got to screwing around. I was bored. And I wasn't doing my typical, 9 to 5 coding that I was, wanting to code anyways, and decided to do something crazy. And I attempted to port LaunchBox to Linux, or Linux, however you want to say it. But anyways, so long story short, I made some progress in porting LaunchBox to Linux. All right. So that is the reason for this stream. I think first off, I want to talk about why I care. So let me get into that here for a second. The main reason why I care about porting LaunchBox to Linux is primarily because of the privacy issues associated with Microsoft as of late. I've been a little bit upset about. I love Windows 10. Windows 10 is, in my opinion, one of the best operating systems ever made, if not the best operating system ever made. I love it. It's wonderful. However, the privacy concerns are a major concern. So that makes me frustrated ultimately, especially since now we're mostly locked into the Windows platform. And the main reason why I've supported Windows all these years in all my development is because Microsoft's development tools are the best available. So anyways, this is going to bed on me. Let me wake this back up. But it's, so that's where I'm coming from with Linux. I don't use Linux on a regular basis. Personally, I've used Linux many times over the years, but mainly just to tinker with it, to play with it. I've never used Linux as a main operating system. I think that it does some things very well. However, it has a number of key issues, and one of the obvious problems with Linux over the years has been a lack of a consistent interface and a lack of concern for interfaces in general. I feel like Ubuntu has gone a long way against that problem, to fix that problem. But there's still a number of issues. But anyways, it is amazing what the community has come up with here in all these various software packages that comprise Linux. It's incredible. So no question, for a free and open source set of software, Linux is absolutely incredible and amazing. But anyways, I'm just rambling now. So here is the gist of what's going on. What I've got in front of me here is MonoDevelop, running on Ubuntu, and MonoDevelop is basically a port of the .NET framework, or not MonoDevelop, but Mono is a port of the .NET framework to Linux, ultimately, and it will also run on OS 10. However, I'm not clear on how well it would run on OS 10. So ultimately, what I did this past weekend was took the LaunchBox source code and ported it over to Linux, and I spent at least today and over the weekend, at least 8 hours total, just hacking away at the code, killing things to finally get this code to actually run. So this has not, in the least bit, been straightforward and easy. And we are nowhere near being able to release this for Linux. So I want to make that very clear. We're nowhere near ready at this point. However, at this point, I have realized that yes, it is feasible to release LaunchBox for Linux. Okay, it's feasible, but it will take a lot of work to get there, is my point. So that's the gist of where I'm coming from. So I kind of want to gauge how, if people care. Do people really? I mean, over the years, I have gotten, over the years, meaning last 3 years, I have gotten quite a few requests for Linux. The question is that how common of a request is that? Because, if I have 25 people in a year contacting me, telling me they want LaunchBox on Linux, and we probably have a lot more than that. That's 25 people. But 25 people is fairly minimal compared to the vast community. So I kind of want to gauge how important this is and whether it's worth the time, because it will be a significant amount of time to get this up and running if we choose to do it. And I do need to go through the comments here. I know I'm getting buried with comments. I appreciate all the comments. I will go through it and read them all. I just hope... yeah, I hope I can get back up at the top and read them. I can always watch the video, I guess. But anyways, yeah, that's the question. Will there be enough demand? Another question is, one of the key issues here, another thing that's very important to note, LaunchBox itself is feasible to port. Sadly, though, Big Box is not. Big Box is not possible to port in any way, shape, or form without completely rewriting the software. Reason being, because Big Box uses WPF for the theming engine and all that stuff, and obviously the theming engine is crucial to Big Box. So re-implementing that theming engine would be a very difficult, nasty mess. So does that mean we could never get Big Box on Linux? No. Does it mean it's going to take a complete rewrite? Yes. So what that means is it can't be a focus anytime soon, and it's just basically, it turns it into a nightmare at that point to implement. So what I'm trying to say is LaunchBox is feasible. Big Box is unfortunately not. So another thing, I got neighbors doing yard work out here. Sorry for that. I don't know if you guys can hear him, but anyways. It's kind of annoying for me. So that's unfortunate. It's very unfortunate that we can't port Big Box because, in all honesty, that's our moneymaker. Big Box is our moneymaker. So it's a matter of, is it still worth porting LaunchBox? And if we ported LaunchBox and it took off and it turned out to be something huge and amazing, sure, then we would work on a Big Box type interface for Linux. It may be completely different than the one we have on Windows because we can't just port that code. It has to be, from scratch, start over. So, and we would probably aim for the same features and the same styles and all that kind of stuff. But anyways, that's where I'm coming from. So I don't know. I guess I can go ahead and demonstrate this here for you guys, for anybody that's interested. Now, it might be a crapshoot whether this actually even runs, because I get issues running it occasionally. So let me give it a run and we'll see what happens here. We get the loading screen comes up just fine every time. However, you'll notice it's slow. One of the reasons why it's slow is because I'm running it in a Hyper-V virtual machine. However, it should be fairly fast because it's using the native virtualization stuff on Intel CPUs. So it should be running fairly quickly. However, it's not. So we obviously have some major performance issues in here, and I'm guessing part of that is related to Mono just not being as optimized as the proper .NET framework. But so we have our work cut out for us there. But there certainly should be workarounds for that. So anyways, while it's loading here, there it is. Oh, see, it just quit. So I'm getting like every other time it just decides to exit randomly, and it locks up. And at one point I even had it lock up my entire virtual machine, the entire computer. So we're pretty early. But the fact that I was able in 8 hours to get it roughly running is optimistic, because if I had to code this whole thing from scratch, it would be thousands of hours, literally thousands of hours. So it's a big deal that I was able to get it up and running on Linux in roughly 8 hours. That's a big deal. So anyways, I guess we can go through some comments now. That's pretty much all I have to say. I don't know. One thing that popped in my head. Let me say one more thing. One thing that popped in my head when I was looking into doing all this is, what if we did a Kickstarter? There it is. There's the interface. So obviously, very, everything is messed up. Nothing's working perfectly. We have random errors coming up. There it is. So we have all kinds of issues with it currently. But the fact that it runs is a big deal. It's very optimistic. And this is much farther than I ever thought I would get in 8 hours in trying to port this to Linux. It's pretty awesome that we got this far. I also have had it running with the sidebar and the game details on the right. So that does work, although half the time, it crashes a lot more frequently when I have those enabled. So, that's the tricky thing there. So I disabled it to try and get it running for this stream. But anyways, so I guess what I'm looking for, guys, is So let me take a step back and present some options here. Obviously, the first option is to say, okay, this is cool, but it's not worth it. Forget it. Let's not even bother with it. The second option would be for me to focus on it and put in some significant effort to it. And continue to work on the Windows version of LaunchBox and MusicBox, but less so, obviously, and then put some effort into this. The third option would be to do a Kickstarter, right? And if the Kickstarter took off, if it succeeded, we could potentially hire somebody to help out with this particular project. Okay, so that's an option as well. One of the main issues with building this for Linux is we don't have an obvious revenue stream right now. So it wouldn't make sense for me to focus on the Linux implementation when it's not going to make us any money and the Windows version is making us money. So the only thing I can think of to do would be some sort of a Kickstarter. I don't really want to make the whole thing paid for Linux. I think that's a stupid idea. I think if we implemented it on Linux, we would probably use the same type of revenue model where we release the free version for everybody, and we do the premium version for the paid folks. However, the premium version on Linux would be much more limited because it's not going to include Big Box. So that's another tricky aspect of it. I'm also thinking, outside of the Kickstarter, I'm also thinking that we probably wouldn't charge people that already have a Windows license for premium on Linux. If you already have a Windows license, it would work on Linux as well. At least that's my current thinking. currently the way I'm thinking. So, that's where I'm at. The question is, how many people would be interested in doing a Kickstarter? How many people would don't and by interested I mean how many people, if we did a Kickstarter, would donate money to the cause? And then generally I shy away from Kickstarters. I hate the concept. I hate the idea. I don't like it. I much prefer the model that we currently have in place, where people pay for use of the premium version of the software. I like that model, especially with the free version in there. And then if you want more features, you get the paid version. The Kickstarter model makes me nervous, and I've never really liked it that much. But I'm willing to do it if there's enough interest in it. So I guess now let me stop talking and read some comments here. All right. Curveball. How about an OS X port? OS 10 port. That's another interesting thing, is if I port it to Linux, in theory, I think it can also be ported to Mac OS 10 with minimal effort. I think, but I haven't tested that. Obviously, that would not be the priority, because I do think we have more Linux users than OS 10 users, or at least Linux is requested a lot more than OS 10 is directly to me. So now, yes, somebody asked, why not make an OS of Big Box for Raspberry Pi? Obviously, Big Box is not going to be feasible. But yes, if this took off, one thing we could do is make our own Linux distribution with LaunchBox included eventually. That's feasible. And it could go on Raspberry Pi. That's feasible. However, LaunchBox right now is probably going to be too slow, I would imagine, because of the the performance issues with Mono. Well, I guess I have to switch my Windows Arcade PC over to Linux. No, hold on. You don't want to even when we do. Okay, it's important to note that even when if we do get this ported over to Linux, Windows is going to be the faster platform. Clearly, okay. So Windows is definitely going to be the preferred platform, no matter what. Linux is at least for the time being. I would love to make it so that the operating system is free for everybody to use, and Linux or LaunchBox works best under Linux, and you don't have to have Windows anymore. I'd love to say that, but from what we're seeing, I don't think that's going to happen anytime soon. Would there be enough demand? That's the question. I don't know. Big Box Lite for Linux, yeah. So, and that's one of my concerns. One of my concerns is that people want Big Box the most. And so if I'm porting LaunchBox, is that a waste of time? I don't know. Is there a way to take a survey? There absolutely is. And we've done the community polls. And so one thing that is likely, actually, is that this ends up on the next community poll, which should be up very soon, actually. Biggest problem with Linux isn't the porting, it's the tech support for it. That's true. There could be some major extra added tech support required, and very few of our moderation team, who are all volunteers, have a lot of experience with Linux. I know ETA Prime, who does our emails and stuff like that, and our videos, of course, does have quite a bit of experience with Linux. But, I don't know. I don't know how difficult that would become, but that's a good point. Windows is kind of bloated if you're making a dedicated gaming machine, in my opinion. It is. However, it's also the fastest at everything. Literally everything it's the fastest at. So you can call it bloated, but it runs everything quicker than everything else, especially in Windows 10. So, what is it? Disk space versus speed? I'll take the speed any day, So Monkus, he says, if you do it, leave it as a community-supported thing. I assume he means One of the things I thought about, okay, was and this is going to come up, so I'll bring it up. One of the things I thought about was open sourcing the base LaunchBox code and just handing it to the Linux community and saying run with it. Unfortunately, I don't think that's feasible, because the moment we do that, we're going to run into a lot more issues with piracy and hacking of the actual LaunchBox for Windows and big box projects. There's just too much code in here that is gonna encourage that kind of thing. So sadly, I would love to be able to do that. If I could do that, if I could open source this code, the LaunchBox for Linux code, without being concerned that stuff is going to be stolen for the Windows side, honestly I would love to do that, but I don't think that's smart, because I think we're risking our income model if we do that. So before somebody brings that up, I wish I could do that, but I don't think I can, sadly. Hey, Jade. An Android port would be more useful. That's another good point. Yes, and I'm kind of with you on that. Although an Android point would also be a million times more work. It would be a rewrite. There's no way to port the LaunchBox code to Android in 8 hours, for example. That's just not going to happen. So, you know, I mean, I've built Android apps before. I know how to build Android apps. And I actually made, before LaunchBox ever came along, I made, a few $1,000 on an Android app. So I've done that. I know how to do it. I know how long it's going to take to build it. And that would be a major undertaking, and it would take away from everything else. So I would love to do that, but I'm not sure that's going to happen anytime soon. Would want big box OS. Yes, I would love that too. Unfortunately, I've already talked about the problems with getting big box on the platform. Without big box, definitely wouldn't use LaunchBox on Linux. Good to know. Will working on a Linux port slow down or hinder Windows development? I've already addressed that, and I know these comments came in early, so that's the gist. But depending on which direction we chose to take, yes, it would, or no, it wouldn't. If we did a Kickstarter to pay for somebody, another guy taking this over and developing it on Linux, then it wouldn't hinder my personal development of LaunchBox and Big Box and Music Box on Windows. But that's only if we can pull off a Kickstarter. Is that feasible? I don't know. I really don't know. Love Linux and would love to say yes, make it happen, but from a business perspective, it makes no sense. Yeah, and you're absolutely right, Monkus. You are absolutely right. Does that mean I want to disregard the idea though? No. When I first got into this, my thought was, okay, I'd love to be able to just do this for the community, because obviously this is not going to boost our revenue to put it on Linux. As a matter of fact, it's a major sacrifice, and it's not. You're right. From a business perspective, it's a very poor decision. From a community perspective, it turns to be it's a much better decision though. So I don't want to disregard it completely. And if there's any way we can pull it off, I'd love to pull it off. So that's kind of where I'm coming from. Wow. Yes, please. If you build it, they will come. Less than 5% user base. Yeah. Yep, I'm aware of that. Hey, EA. Interesting. Having used Linux as a desktop OS for quite some time, I'd say stick with Windows. Linux is too variable, especially when trying to support multiple distros that have many custom repositories. That's another issue with Linux. Absolutely. Agreed. What about emulators and stuff? Do they all run okay on Linux? RetroArch does. Sorry, RetroArch. I say RetroArch and people get upset. Anyways, yes. There are emulators that run on Linux, and quite a few of them. Is emulator support as good as Windows? No. Heck no. Nowhere near. But yes, there's plenty of emulators that do run well on Linux. Cool, Monkus. DM John, interested. Good to hear. Most emulators start on Linux. Yeah, well, because emulators are often open source, it makes sense for them to start on Linux. I don't know about most, but maybe that is true. I don't know. Performance is about 50% from what I understand on mono. Yeah, that makes sense based on what I'm seeing. That makes a lot of sense. Thank you, Ian. Why not make an OS for big box using Linux and you just like put the license X on the boot install and install the OS successfully? Sure. Yeah, we've already covered that. I'd love to be able to do that though. Good to know, Nicholas. Kickstarter! Yeah, there's plenty of ways to get around the privacy issues under Windows, and certainly I do all that. Hi, Sarah. Bring LaunchBox to Linux. Thought it'd be worth it. Not sure the money would be there. Yeah, I'm with you on that. Kickstarter would be a great way to gauge it, advertise it, and see where it goes. Yes, that's true. I don't really want to put in all the effort on a Kickstarter if there's a 25% chance that it's gonna go off though. So you can bet if I'm gonna do a Kickstarter, I'm gonna do a poll and a whole bunch of other stuff first to make sure that Kickstarter is really gonna happen. If I'm gonna do it, or at least there's a good chance that it's gonna happen. I'm not going to go through all the effort to do the Kickstarter unless it's actually feasible. I would be okay with kickstarting a Linux version if Big Box is included. Big Box is not included. It's not possible to include Big Box. So that's just not going to happen. So if that kills it, oh well, it's done. Would a Linux-based LaunchBox be run on a RetroPie? In theory, I think it should. However, performance might be an issue. Kickstarter for Big Box on Linux. Yeah, unfortunately, sure that's possible, but it's the resources required to do that are huge. So yeah, we could do a Kickstarter for Big Box on Linux, sure, and I could hire somebody to pull it off, but you're talking thousands and thousands of hours of development, which is going to cost a lot of money, and I don't think that Kickstarter unfortunately would go through. Yeah, so Android. Let me bring that up again. Yes, it was on the poll. Android was on the poll, and you know what? It scored very poorly on that poll. So the reason why I have not pursued Android is because it did poorly on the poll, right? If I send out a community poll and very few people tell me they're interested in Android, everybody wants other features for Windows, I ain't going to tackle Android. So unfortunately, honestly, I was excited about Android. I wanted to tackle Android myself. I use Android phones, and I would love to have it personally. But we already did that poll, and no one wanted it. Or at least nobody wanted it as much as they wanted the Windows features. So that's not going to happen, sadly. Linux don't got no games to even put in LaunchBox. It does, though. It does. It's got lots of emulators. Kickstarter, cool. Would a Linux version pave the way for porting to OS 10 and Android? It would pave the way for porting to OS 10. It would not pave the way for porting to Android. And in theory, once we have a Linux version, porting it to OS 10 should be relatively straightforward, I think. One of the challenges we have with LaunchBox itself is it's all about interfacing with the OS, right? It's all about firing off other EXEs. It's all about, um, you know, file systems and all that kind of stuff. So it's a more difficult thing to port than a lot of other types of applications, especially when it comes to dealing with other emulators and stuff. Is every bit of code I have to run an EXE is going to change in Linux, and every bit of code I have to interface with an emulator is going to change in Linux. So that becomes more of a challenge. Linux can run Windows in a VM, that it can. No need. Linux people ain't got no money. Would you interested only if it had big box? So unfortunately, that means you're not interested. Not for me. So we're definitely getting a lot more people who don't care, who aren't interested, which is kind of what I suspected. Brennan says LaunchBox Big Box is the only thing I miss about having Windows. About not having Windows, sure. Dolphin emulator works fine in Linux as well as RetroArch. Linux users are dirt poor. No, Linux users are broad. There's no, you can't make that assumption. I think it's tackling a niche that doesn't exactly need to be tackled. A niche, however you say that. Here's a suggestion, and I think I know the answer already. Make a basic Linux version and open source it and let others do the work. No money in it, though, so that's why I know you will say no. Monkus. Thanks for painting me out to be a money-hungry scum. I'm not against that. However, there's going to be a lot of work on my part to get that done. That's my main concern. Is although it seems like it's easy to take it and just and hack down all the features and make it, basic. That's not as easy as you would think. So there's a lot of time in it that to be required to do something like that. But that is actually not a bad idea. And so if everything else falls through, right? If nothing else works, I might consider doing something like that. Just open sourcing a very small version of LaunchBox with without a lot of the features. But again, that's going to be a lot of work, so I'm not sure. Kelvin would pay again for Linux. Good to know. Philip says, me too. Think Linux would be a good idea as it is better for less powerful lightweight machines without needing to shell out a large amount for a legal copy of Windows. Sure. Is Android feasible? I've covered that already. Not really. For example, file system performance is much greater on Linux. Oh, so you guys are saying Linux is better for performance. Yeah, so you could say that certain things are faster on Linux, I'm sure. But they've been saying file system performance is better on Linux for since I can remember, and it's always been a lie. It might be true now, though. I don't know. Big Box Lite for Windows. Interesting. Big Box is what separates LaunchBox from the rabble. Without it, I don't see the point, and I'm one of those who is really for the Linux port. You can say that, but we were big-ish even before Big Box came out. We had a significant number of users. And there are still a huge number of users that use LaunchBox without Big Box and don't care about Big Box. Huge. Remember, LaunchBox is free. So, no, Big Box is not the only thing that separates LaunchBox from the rabble. There is a significant number of users who use LaunchBox. And there's not much that competes with LaunchBox currently. There's more stuff that competes with Big Box than there is with LaunchBox. Do like the idea of a Kickstarter only because that would allow you to pay someone else to port the Linux version, allowing you to continue development on Windows. Yes, and I'm in agreement on that. If it does come to Linux, I donate or something similar because I already have a key. Don't want you to waste your time. Sure. Thank you, Freestyle. Steam is on Linux with tons of games. It is. There's more games on Linux than you'd realize. They make a light version of LaunchBox for Linux, which is what this would be ultimately. One of the things, there's a few things that currently. So if I continued with this, the very first version would be missing some key things. It would be missing music playback and video playback, because right now the implementations I use for those are VLC, which does work on Linux, but it would need a completely different implementation of VLC in order to make it work on Linux. So the first release of the Linux version, if we continued with it, and I put in the effort to make it happen, would be short those features. There's also significant use of DirectX in LaunchBox, which obviously will never work on Linux. Controller input is all done through DirectX. So controller input is probably another thing that won't make it into the initial release for Linux. For doing LaunchBox on Linux, to do a LaunchBox distro or on its own OS. Yeah. Cool. Android for the Asus Tinkerboard. There is mono for Android. There is, yes. However, you're never going to run the same interface, the LaunchBox interface on Android. That's just stupid. So it would need a rewrite for several reasons. One, performance is never going to fly. Two, you need a new interface. So we might not have to rewrite everything for an Android version, but we're going to have to rewrite the majority of it. Stay on Windows. Windows. Would support a Kickstarter. Not many people have what you offer. Thank you, Armand. To be clear, this will not work on the Raspberry Pi. Oh, crap. I lost my spot. Stupid. To be clear, this will not work on the Raspberry Pi. The Pi uses an ARM CPU. This is strictly for x86. I'm not quite sure, ETA. That is true, but you have to remember that .NET can be compiled for different platforms. So in theory, there might be a way to compile for ARM. I don't know though. I really don't know. So I'm not really sure, but it's potentially possible. Contribute to a Linux port if the programmer hired was porting, rewriting Big Box. Problem is with that, DM John, that the amount required to make that happen, the amount of money required to make that happen for a Kickstarter, would probably would never take off. It would never go. That's my guess, anyways. Because we're talking thousands of hours. I'm guessing like to finish this off. And get this running, my guess would be maybe 80 hours of work. So paying a developer 80 hours of work, that's a lot of money, but it's feasible, right? Paying a developer thousands of hours of work, I'm not convinced it's going to be so feasible. Don't do a full distro. Sure. Thank you, Clint. That makes sense. Yeah, you don't have the time and resources to do it securely. And you're right there. You're very right there. Somebody in the community could do it, but yeah. And I'm going to sleep again. You dual boot with Windows to be a bit more convenient, but not necessary for you. Good to know. Just a simple version of LaunchBox to keep our GOG games organized, sure. Rather see you build a pin box front end for virtual pinball instead of porting LaunchBox to Linux. Not a bad idea. I'd pay for that if it was good. Linux, probably not. Big community of Windows VP players. It is RetroArch. Yeah, that's what I say. Hate to say it, but I think people will be expecting it to run it on Raspberry Pi, and the just amount of people who have absurd support problems on RetroPie alone, I think it's going to turn into a nightmare for support. Oh yeah, of course. Anything is going to be a nightmare for support, especially when you don't use Windows. Yeah. The fact of the matter is, forums. When you have these things, the more users you have, the more people are going to get on the forums, and you hope that the community can solve other people's problems. One of the reasons why LaunchBox took off from the beginning is simply because of emulation problems. We started the forums. I started the forums early on, and thanks to you guys, the forums took off, and we got tons and tons of traffic, and that's why LaunchBox is successful, because of those forums. So problems aren't necessarily the biggest problem on earth. It just means that you need people to hammer away at it, hack away at it, try and fix the problems, and then post about it on the forums. Post their problems and then get people to help out on the forums. So right now, do we have a good set of help on the forums for Linux? No, because we don't have anything Linux going on. But that would come, I would expect. So that's not a major issue to me, although, because the community will step up. We've seen it before, and we'll see it again. The community does step up once you provide the means for them to do so. I'm happy with focus on Windows and focus on quality of life improvements. Hey, Quad. Bluebird, LaunchBox for Linux? Yes, please. Put the poll first before the Kickstarter. That's what I'm thinking. And I might actually put out a poll soon, and separate it from a poll from the next feature poll. I'm thinking we could put it all together, but I think it might be too important to just throw it all in one bucket. TJ, I would donate my time to work on it. I don't need the extra money, and I'd love to have it done. Well, that's cool. However, one thing is important to me is to pay somebody. If I'm going to have somebody work on it, I've refused 1 million people that said, "Hey, I would love to work on the project for free. You just share the source code with me, and I'll help you out." The problem with that, there's lots of problems with that as a business. One is that I have to be able to trust the person I'm giving the source code to, that they're not going to run away with the source code. So there's forms to sign and all this stuff, and I don't take advantage of people. I don't want anybody to work on the stuff that isn't getting paid. It's just against my what I want to be doing. If it runs okay on Pi, yes, and that's a question. I don't know. It's probably going to be slow if it does. I don't know. Well, I know Big Box on Linux. We've already covered that, so I'm not going to cover it again. You can watch the beginning of the video and you'll get that. Hakeem, without Big Box, it's not really a point. LaunchBox is great for organizing and all, but it's the flashy front end that people want. Yes, at least that's what people want to pay for. That's true. I'm with you on that. However, LaunchBox is requested all the time for Linux. I still get that requested. Easy NetPlay integration for LaunchBox. Yeah, and I'm working on that right now. And that may prove to be, that might not happen because of NetPlay issues with RetroArch NetPlay, but I'm hopefully going to make that happen. That was the last thing to implement from the poll, by the way, Separated Soul. What about a different product that wouldn't clash with Big Box and LaunchBox but does it differently? Yeah, I mean, LaunchBox works the ideal way I would want this to work. And I don't want to build that, at least at this point, I don't want to build this completely separate app that is completely unrelated to LaunchBox and Big Box, but yes. You would be surprised at how many people just use LaunchBox and Big Box rarely gets used, myself included, and I'm a moderator. Yes, and you know, for people that just use a desktop computer, Big Box is big and flashy and fun, and so a lot of people, want to use Big Box because it's fun. But there are a huge number of people that just use the desktop interface because they use it on a desktop computer. They don't have a or don't want a living room environment thing. They don't want, or they probably do want, but they don't have an arcade cabinet, to put the stuff on. And if you're just using it on a desktop computer, there's not a whole lot of reason other than flash and big flash, fun stuff, and prettiness, and showing it off to your friends and all that stuff. There's not a whole lot of reason to use the big box interface if you're just using a keyboard and mouse on a desktop computer. Although I know a lot of people do, and I do too because it's fun. So take that with a grain of salt. But anyways, yeah, if you don't care about big flash and you want functionality primarily, you want ease of use, you're going to use LaunchBox. You're not going to use Big Box because Big Box is meant for a controller type interface. And if you have a keyboard and mouse in front of you, you might as well use a keyboard and mouse, Thank you, Easy Cheese. The Dolphin emulator, I hear, does work on Linux, yes. Pac-Man, I would tend to stay focused on continuing development on Windows and use the poll to get a feel for the majority of people want. Yeah, well, and we will. We definitely will do that. I don't know if I'm probably going to use. I'm going to use it. Well, I'm guessing based on the feedback here, I'm probably going to send out a poll here soon to judge how many people are interested in the Linux port, right? Are you tired of typing sudo? Yeah. Well, I probably only had to type it 25 times in setting this all up. Most people who say they want LaunchBox on Linux meant Big Box. I'm not sure. We'll see. We'll have to gauge that from the poll. I only use LaunchBox to load games for viewing in Big Box. Yeah, and a lot of people are like that as well. Jay's Arcade, especially, it depends on how you use it. Certainly, if you're using a controller and you want to control everything with a controller, even if you're at your desktop computer, Big Box is a much better option than LaunchBox. Because although LaunchBox works with a controller, it's just not the right interface for it. So, I'm not a money-hungry scum. Yeah, right. Don't believe the poll. That's not a fair test. There are limited choices on Android front ends. LaunchBox would totally dominate and change emulation on Android. Well, yeah, I believe that, Matt, and I think I would love to do it still. I'm not going to never do Android. I would love to do it, but we need the resources to be able to do it. It's another huge project. So again, so that's another question. Who all will be interested in doing a Kickstarter to build LaunchBox for Android? That's what I put on the poll, and there was not nearly enough people interested in it to do it. So that's the question. Is it worth doing that? I don't know. Yeah, I use Windows and I am dirt poor. Would pay double for it. Tongue in cheek, yeah. Would pay again even for a stripped down version of LaunchBox for Linux. Thank you, Raging Loon. I know 3 with Pi arcades that would switch. Don't really care about Big Box, but an Ubuntu version of LaunchBox would be great. There you go. Was using LaunchBox before Big Box, but Big Box is why I parted with my shekels. Yes. Yeah, I think a lot of people are in that situation, John. Bought LaunchBox and could care less about Big Box. Let me go lock my door because my kids came home and I want to make sure I don't get interrupted here. I do need to get off here soon because my whole family just came home and I don't want to, make them all be quiet the whole time. Of course, I'm logged out of my Linux, so well. Can't wait for the next feature poll. Been wanting option to create custom submenus and manual sorting in Big Box for a while. Highest voted on Bitbucket. Just saying. Yeah. So what I'm gonna be doing a live stream to come up with items on the poll here at some point when we're ready to do that. I haven't decided if we're gonna put 8.0 out before that or not. So we'll see. If LaunchBox goes to Linux, I will definitely be switching my Pi over or even my desktop Linux PC. It would be good to start to install it on some single board computer, huge alternative of what you can find now. Yeah, and well, the thing is, like right now we have, the first step is to decide whether we're going to continue with this. And we're going to put in the 80 or so hours. That's just a rough guess, guys. It's always impossible to predict how long something like this is going to take. But is it going to be worth putting in the 80 hours to port LaunchBox to Linux fully, get it actually working without freezing, and with all the basic features, you know? So I don't know. Guys, I'm streaming, okay? I need you all to go downstairs, all right? I think LaunchBox for Linux would be a very cool thing to have in my laptop. I use Linux there, and my games are not as organized as my PC due to that, so it'd be really useful for you at least. Good to know. Thank you, El Grapas. Welcome, man. All for a Linux version. LaunchBox got tested by arcade punks not too long ago. LaunchBox for Linux, I'm in. Hey, Slip System. Hey, Nai. Greetings. Condoroy from Uruguay. I hope I said that right. Take it easy, Sarah. Thank you. Would it be written in Python? No. No. Mono, yes. Can we do a... Oh my goodness, McTurbo. Oh. I too would buy it for a LaunchBox thing like Visual Pinball Pin Name. Sure. You know, we're not too far away from that. And actually, I was going to be surprised, and I was working out for a long time a pinball version of Big Box. Or, you know, an easy way to add pinball to Big Box. So I'm sure we'll probably put something like that on the poll. LaunchBox is a big enough project to face a jump to Linux, but I hope that it is possible. Yeah. We're talking about it. Hekarua M. You can go back once the stream is over and watch the beginning of the stream. No, I'm getting Twitch messages. A GUI with Unity 3D, is it possible? It might be. I don't know. You have Linux on your ThinkPad, so this would be awesome. Good to know. Could you send the polls through email? Yes, I will. And that's what we always do. Because we have our largest user base in email. Because everybody who downloads the product gives us their email address. The free product even. So that's we have a large number of emails. If it's just LaunchBox and not Big Box, I'd rather see the Linux implementation be light and open source. Sure. But you remember, if we do that, it's going to be very limited. So I don't know. Good day, RC. Hey, Tori. If it doesn't run well on Pis, I'd be curious to see what distros there's a demand for. Already sounds wonderful. Thank you, Tachikoma. You need both. A lot of people use big box on an arcade cabinet. Absolutely. The thing is, if we do this, it's going to work on any Linux distribution, at least any x86 or x64 Linux distribution, and hopefully we get it working on ARM as well. And there's annoyances with various distributions and getting it working, but the code is not going to change on the distributions. Stick Android on the poll just again for laughs. No need for Linux. Raspberry Pi is there already. I want LaunchBox, Big Box, and Windows Power computers. Yeah. I think a lot of people are in that boat. Lenovo touchscreen. Best bet would be Android. There's no poll yet. The poll will be coming. Ian, Jason and I am building a bar top cab. Can I get the artwork from your cab? Yes, we already released it. It's on the forum somewhere. So yes, that's already available. And if you do it, I want to see a picture for sure. Poll would be better promoted on a Linux dedicated board. Those are the users you're targeting. You know what? That's a pretty good point, that man84. So if we did do a poll, we might want to have some extra coverage there. Or when we do the poll, I am planning on doing the poll. Good to hear, Zello. Emulation station already exists for the Raspberry Pi. Seems unnecessary for you. Sure. Emulation station is excellent. And actually, when I first built Big Box, Emulation Station was one of the products that I emulated because I really like Emulation Station. However, it's very, very simple in comparison. There's a lot missing. Are there going to be any dev streams? Those are so cool. There might be in the future, yeah. I do want to get back to it at some point. I got burned out for a while. So I was just taking a break. I don't know that we'll ever get back to the whole 2 times a week thing because that's what burned me out to begin with. But yes, we'll probably do dev streams at some point here. Why not just make a LaunchBox OS? Yeah, a lot of people are saying that, and I would love that as well. However, of course, yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's an even bigger undertaking than porting it to Linux. The Garden. Hi from Sao Paulo, Brazil. Linux Mint here. And yes, LaunchBox Linux ASAP, done it right, it would be an instant hit. I'm not sure. LaunchBox is written in C#, Core, .NET, compatibility, multi-platform. Not quite sure what you're saying, 99, but yes, the reason we're using Mono is because that's how you port C# to Linux. How did I learn Android development? Honestly, I taught it to myself. I already knew Java at that point from college, and I actually learned C# because Java is almost C# is almost identical to Java. So Java was, I already knew Java. Good to know, Monkus. Sweet, Ian. Any chance of implementing a third display option to be used for displaying controller layouts per system would also be great for a pinball big box if that happens. Yes, that's certainly a possibility. It just hasn't been, it's not a common request. So is it going to be prioritized? Probably not, because not very many people have 3 screens, Hey, Silent Hillbilly. We do have an emulation station theme for Big Box. When do I stream? Right now, it's just random. I don't have a schedule. What was the app that I made? I took it down a long time ago. It was Audiolog HD. It was basically an audio recorder app, but I stopped supporting it. I didn't want new people buying it, and it was, like I said, I made a few $1,000 off of it, which is a base hit, but at some point it just isn't worth the support, especially when I have LaunchBox. You know what I mean? So I took it down a long time ago. Cool. Well, thank you guys. I'm caught up on comments. I appreciate all the feedback, all the support. Oh man, I love you guys so much for all the support. Thank you so much. You guys all know that I love what I'm doing. Even if I'm not streaming, you guys have to remember that at heart I'm a hermit, right? Okay. So the reason why I'm successful at code is because that's all I ever want to do. And although I enjoy talking to people from time to time, I'm a hermit at heart. I'm an introvert, and I like being holed up in my little hole here, coding. That's what I love to do. So there's never any risk that I'm going to stop doing that because it's my life. I love to code, and I love LaunchBox and all this stuff. Like I said, I apologize that I haven't been streaming too much lately, but that's why. It's my personality. I like to be holed up, and I come out for my family, and I come out for church once a week or twice a week. But I literally, I love to just sit in here and code. And that's one of the biggest reasons why LaunchBox is so successful. So anyways, bear with me. Again, I'm sorry that it's been so long since I streamed. I'm not ruling it out for the future. I will be streaming occasionally, and we may even do a development stream coming up here at some point. So keep an eye out, but I'm not going to have a regular schedule, just because it's easier for me to stay productive without getting burned out when I am not, required to stream at certain times every week. So that's where I'm coming from. But yeah, I love you all. Thank you all for so much support. I can always be reached on the forums, of course. But I'll talk to you guys soon. Keep an eye out for that poll. My plan is to put an email out sometime soon with a poll as to whether we should do something with Linux or not. So that's where we're coming from. 8.0 development for Windows is on its way. I was working on 8.0 development last week, and over the weekend I just started on this Linux thing. So it's the latest thing we did for the 8.0 development, LaunchBox 8.0 development for Windows, was add the Chromium backend so that we could have PDF support in Big Box, and that's there. So that's the last new feature that we added. I'm working on, for the Windows stuff, I'm working to see how feasible implementing the last thing from the last poll, which is RetroArch NetPlay integration. So we are running into some hitches with that, but I'm still looking to see how feasible that is. That's on my plate. So that's where we are. I'm going to be coming up with a new poll here as well, and that may or may not be before the 8.0 release. It depends on if we get enough new features in 8.0 before the poll or after the poll. I'm not sure. We'll see what happens. I might end up putting out the poll before 8.0, especially if for whatever reason RetroArch NetPlay this just doesn't work out, because that is a possibility at this point because it's got some issues. With the RetroArch NetPlay is fairly rough at this point. So the question is it worth implementing in LaunchBox, and is it going to work to implement it in LaunchBox? So that's the gist there. But anyways, thank you all very much. Thanks for joining, and I'll see you guys again relatively soon. If not on the forums, whatever. But Thanks all once again. Have a good one.